You left the house after breakfast on a Saturday morning in 1965, and your mother did not know where you were until the streetlights came on. You were 7 years old. You had $1 in your pocket and a Schwinn Sting-Ray with a banana seat and sissy bar. The whole neighborhood was yours, and your mother was not worried. Nobody was worried. That was America, and it does not exist anymore. Before we dive in, hit subscribe and drop a comment letting us know where you're watching from. The streetlights. You have to start with the streetlights, because every child in America in 1965 understood one single rule without ever being told it twice. When the streetlights came on, you came home, not 5 minutes after, not when you felt like it, when the streetlights came on. And every mother in America knew this rule too, and every mother stood at the kitchen window at dusk, drying her hands on a dish towel and watching for the first pale glow of the street lamp at the corner and waiting for the screen door to slam and her child to come running up the walk, red-cheeked and out of breath from playing all day with kids whose names she half knew and half did not. You came in the door and she did not ask where you had been. She knew where you had been. You had been on the block. You had been at the creek behind the Miller's house. You had been riding bikes down Elm Street with the Donahue boys. You had been in somebody's backyard eating a sandwich somebody's mother made you because you were there at lunch. And that was what mothers did. You had been free day. Free in a way that no child in America has been free since. And the block. The block was its own country. Every house on your block looked almost like every other house on your block because your parents had moved to the suburbs after the war. The whole neighborhood had been built at the same time by the same company with the same floor plans. Nobody cared because what mattered was not the house, it was the people inside the house. You knew every single one of them, not by reputation, not by waving from a driveway, by name. The Millers next door had a dog named Rusty. The Donahues across the street had 3 boys. Mrs. Petersen, 2 doors down, made the best chocolate chip cookies in the state of Ohio, and you knew because you had been in her kitchen eating them. Mr. Kowalski on the corner fixed radios in his garage and would let you watch him do it if you stood quietly. You knew the mailman by name. You knew the milkman by name. You knew the paperboy by name because he was the older brother of the kid you rode bikes with. And the milkman, you have to talk about the milkman because every morning before you even woke up, a man in a white uniform drove a small truck down your street and he stopped at every single house. He lifted glass bottles of fresh, cold milk out of a metal crate and he walked up your front walk and he placed those bottles on the porch in a small metal box that every house had built right into the wall. Some houses had a little door that opened from the inside too, so your mother could just open the door and the milk was already there like magic. The milkman took the empty bottles back and he left new ones. You never saw him, but he was there every morning for 20 years. In the 1960s, a huge share of every gallon of milk sold in America still came through home delivery by a man who knew your name. By 1975, it was only 7%. By 2005, it was less than 1%. The milkman is a museum exhibit now. But in 1965, he was the sound of morning. The clink of glass on the porch, the soft thump of the truck door closing down the street, the sound of America waking up. And the newspaper. The newspaper was there by 6 in the morning. It was thrown by a boy on a Schwinn bicycle with a canvas bag across his chest. That boy was 13 years old. He was up before the sun. He rode the whole block in 40 minutes. He delivered 60 papers. He made $3 a week, and he thought he was rich. Your father stood on the porch in his slippers, picked up the paper, brought it inside, and read it at the kitchen table, while your mother made coffee in a percolator that burbled and hissed and filled the whole kitchen with the smell of Folgers. And that was how the day started. Every day, in every house, on every block, in every town. And the church bells. At 9 o'clock on Sunday morning, the church bells rang. Every family on every block put on their finest clothes, climbed into the family car, and drove 3 blocks to the local church, because every block in America in 1965 had a church 3 blocks away. You walked in and you saw your neighbors. You sat next to them. The same pew every week. The same hymnal. The same priest or pastor or rabbi had baptized you, would eventually bury your grandmother, and knew your name, your father's name, and your father's father's name, because he had lived in this town his whole life, and so had you. Church was not just church. Church was the organizing principle of the week. Sunday morning was the still point the entire community rotated around. And the porch. Oh, the porch. The front porch was where America lived in 1965. Not the living room, not the backyard, the front porch, where the street could see you and where you could see the street. Your grandfather sat on the porch in a rocking chair every evening after dinner. He had a pipe, a newspaper, and a glass of iced tea sweating on the wicker table beside him. Neighbors walked past, not for exercise. Nobody walked for exercise in 1965. They walked because they were going somewhere or coming back from somewhere. Your grandfather called out hello, they called out hello, and sometimes they came up the steps and sat down. The 2 men talked for an hour about baseball or the weather or the new Chevy Impala Mr. Johnson had just bought. And the kids ran past on the sidewalk chasing each other. Somebody's mother on somebody's porch called out, "Slow down, you're going to trip." Somebody's father said, "Let them run, they're kids." That was the front porch. That was America in the evening. That was what we have lost. And then the sounds. The sounds of a 1960s American neighborhood are gone, and you cannot get them back. The screen door slamming. The screen door slam was the single most American sound of the 20th century. Every screen door in every house in every town in America slammed the exact same way. It meant a child was coming in or going out. You could stand in your kitchen and hear every screen door on the block from a quarter-mile away and know exactly who was home and who was not. The lawnmower on Saturday morning, the ice cream truck, the real ice cream truck, with a man driving it who knew every kid on every block, who rang a little bell and played a song from a speaker on the roof. Every child in the whole neighborhood came running from wherever they were with a nickel in their fist. The bouncing basketball, the crack of a wooden bat at the sandlot on Elm, the voices of mothers calling their kids in for dinner from 6 different porches at once, and every child could tell which voice was his mother without ever looking up. That was the sound of a neighborhood. That was the sound of home. And the kids. There were so many kids. The baby boom meant every single street in America in 1965 was covered in children. The average suburban block had 20 families. Most families had 3 or 4 kids. You never had to plan a play date. You never had to call somebody's mother. You walked outside and there were kids. Always. 5 kids in the front yard, 6 kids on the corner, 10 kids at the vacant lot playing stickball with a broom handle and a rubber ball. You went wherever the kids were, and the kids were everywhere. You came home at dark with scrapes on your knees, dirt on your face, and a grin your mother did not have to ask about. And the women. The women of the 1960s neighborhood knew each other in a way that women today mostly do not. They met over coffee in each other's kitchens while the kids played in the yard. They had bridge clubs. They had Tupperware parties. They had church auxiliary meetings, PTA meetings, book clubs, and coffee clatches. They showed up at each other's doors without calling first, because calling first was not a thing yet. One of them was pregnant, and the other three knew before she even told her husband. They had been friends since she moved onto the block, and they could tell just from looking. One of them was going through something hard, and the other three showed up with casseroles before she had even asked for help. That was the neighborhood. That was what a neighborhood used to be. And the men walked home from work in the evening. Nobody had a long commute. The factory was 3 miles away. The office was 4 miles away. The school where you taught was right in town. You walked home or you drove home in a Chevy Impala that took 10 minutes. You pulled into the driveway at 5:30, your wife had dinner on the table at 6, and you sat down together as a family. You ate and you talked about the day. Nobody had a phone in their pocket because there were no phones in pockets. It was 1965. After dinner, you sat on the porch, you waved at the neighbors, and you watched your kids play in the yard until the street lights came on. Then everybody came inside. You turned on the black and white television you had just bought. You watched Ed Sullivan on Sunday or Walter Cronkite on weeknights. Then you went to bed and you did it all again the next day. It was ordinary and it was perfect. And you did not know at the time that it was perfect, but looking back now, you understand it. And the 4th of July, you have to talk about the 4th of July, because on the 4th of July in 1965, your whole block turned into one single party. Somebody's father set up sawhorses at both ends of the street and laid plywood across them, and the block was closed to cars for the whole day. Somebody else brought the grill out of his garage, dragged it into the middle of the street, and started it up at noon. The mothers all brought dishes. Mrs. Petersen brought potato salad. Mrs. Donahue brought a green bean casserole. Somebody's grandma brought a watermelon that had been sitting in a galvanized tub of ice since breakfast. The kids ran wild. They sprayed each other with garden hoses. They lit sparklers at dusk. The fathers stood around the grill with cans of Schlitz or Pabst in their hands and talked about the Dodgers and the Mets. The mothers sat in lawn chairs in a circle on somebody's lawn and laughed. And when it got dark, everybody walked together to the park at the end of the block and watched the fireworks. Every single person on the block, together, one night, every year, and nobody organized it, nobody sent an invitation, it just happened, because that is what neighborhoods did. And the grandmother on the porch, somebody on your block always had a grandmother on the porch. She sat in the same wicker chair every afternoon from 2 o'clock until dinner. She watched the kids go by. She knew which kids belonged to which houses. She knew which kids were in trouble and which kids were not. She waved at every single one. She called some of them over sometimes to give them a cookie or a hard candy or just to ask how school was going. She had lived on that block for 40 years. She had raised her own children on that block, and now her grandchildren were on that block, and somewhere in her head she was keeping score of every summer every kid had ever lived. When a new baby was born 2 doors down, the grandmother on the porch was the first person to know, even before the father. That grandmother was the memory of the neighborhood. She was the reason it held together. Every neighborhood had one. When she was gone, a piece of the neighborhood went with her. The neighborhood was not utopia. It was not for everyone. Not every block was welcoming to every family. Women were expected to stay home whether they wanted to or not. Nobody talked about the things that were hard. There was a dark side, and it mattered, and it is part of the honest truth about that time. But for the millions of people who lived inside that America and walked those sidewalks and sat on those porches and watched their kids disappear after breakfast and come home at dusk and eat dinner at a table with their mother and father every single night, The feeling was real, the feeling of being held by a place. The feeling of every adult on the block knowing your name. The feeling of being a 7-year-old kid with $1 in your pocket and a Schwinn and the whole summer in front of you. That feeling was real, and we have not found it since. It was not the houses that made the neighborhood. It was not the cars or the appliances or the white picket fences. It was the fact that for one brief moment in American history, a huge number of people lived in one small place together, and they saw each other every day, and they knew each other by name, and they raised each other's children a little bit, and they trusted each other enough to leave their front doors unlocked and their windows open and their kids out until sunset. That was the difference. That was the thing we lost, and we did not lose it because of one bad decision. We lost it because of air conditioning and the Interstate Highway Act and the television in the living room and the dual-income household and the long commute and the smartphone and 100 other things that each made sense at the time, and nobody meant to lose it, but we lost it anyway. If you grew up on a street in 1965 with kids running wild and a milkman on the porch and a church bell on Sunday morning and your mother at the kitchen window at dusk waiting for you to come home, that memory is yours and nobody can take it from you. The block is probably still there, but the feeling is gone. The screen doors are gone. The front porches are empty. The kids are inside. The milkman is a museum exhibit. The streetlights still come on at dusk, but they do not call anybody home. But you were there. You rode that Sting-Ray. You heard those screen doors. You came home when the streetlights came on because your mother was waiting at the window, and you remember what it felt like. And that feeling is the proof that it was real. If you grew up in a 1960s neighborhood, tell me the street name. If you remember the milkman, tell me which dairy it was. If the church bell rang on Sunday morning and you could hear it from your porch, tell me the church. And if you were the kid on the Sting-Ray with the $1 in your pocket and the whole summer in front of you, tell me about it.